Hello, my name is Ella. On my 18th birthday, my father snarled in my face, called me a parasite, and slammed the deadbolt while my sisters smirked from the doorway. I walked into the rain with one suitcase and no way back. But what cut deeper than that night was the silence that followed. The calls that never came, the mail that was hidden, the inheritance they tried to erase. And now, years later, they've filled my phone with desperate messages. But why now? And what truth have they been trying so hard to bury? The house looked like a postcard that forgot how to tell the truth. The white fence along our front lawn had been scrubbed earlier that week, the roses clipped into obedient bulbs, the porch light polished until it caught the last light of evening. Inside, the table gleamed with my mother's wedding china, and the roast beef sent a ribbon of warm, peppery air around the room. If a neighbor had walked by, they would have said, "That family has it together." They always did. It was the kind of illusion that photographs well, what people call a Norman Rockwell painting, until you step closer and notice the cracks in the canvas. I sat at the far end of the table, the end closest to the hallway, where the family portraits lined the wall. In every frame, my sister's smile met the camera dead on, bright and certain. In most of those frames, I was somewhere to the side, an elbow or a shoulder, a little blurred. That night, the silverware made careful noises. Tap, slide, settle, as if even the forks knew to behave. My mother poured water with both hands, her knuckles pale against the pitcher. My father carved the meat with calm precision, each slice neat enough to pass inspection. We said grace. We did not say happy birthday. The calendar could shout it all it wanted. The room had decided to whisper. Across from me, my sister Celiora slid into her chair like a star taking her mark. She gave me a glance that wasn't a glance at all, the kind you feel more than see. Quick, appraising, satisfied. I tucked my hands into my lap to keep them warm and steady. A card lay at each plate, handwritten in my mother's careful loops. Mom, Dad, Celiora. At my place, there was a blank tent folded in half. The ink had never touched it. Blank is a choice. Blank announces itself. My father lifted his glass. Before we pass the bread, I want to say something. He stood, a small, formal act we had been trained to admire. To the one who makes us proud every day, Celiora. He turned his smile toward her, a smile that said, "I see you. I choose you. Your debate trophy, your early admissions interviews, the clinic hours you've shadowed, this is the kind of discipline our family is known for." "Thank you, Dad," she said. She didn't blush. She didn't need to. She reached for her water, and her sleeve revealed a thin gold bracelet my mother had given her last month. My mother looked at the bracelet, not at me, as if the metal needed guarding more than I did. My father sat, but kept the floor. Excellence repeats itself in a household like ours. We carry a name we don't take lightly. He tapped the rim of his glass with his knife. "To that name." "To that name," my mother echoed, steady as a metronome. She set down her glass and straightened the napkin on her lap. He turned to me and, with a small tilt of his head, slid a place card toward my plate. The card said guest. He said, "And to the one who is still finding her footing, may she discover where she can contribute." I didn't reach for the card. The letters sat there, dark and tidy. I pressed my tongue to the back of my teeth to keep words from jumping out without permission. Heat rose along my neck, not the kind that warms you, the kind that warns you. I watched the roast beef juice gather in a neat oval on my plate. I counted my breaths. I heard the refrigerator kick on in the kitchen, a low hum, a faithful machine. He carved another slice. "Let's not keep the food waiting." My fork found potatoes and pretended this was an ordinary night. It wasn't. Nothing about a place card that erases your name is ordinary. I could have left it there and swallowed the meal with the insult, but I had been carrying good news like a lit match all week, and I was done cupping my hand around it to keep it from going out. When the plates were half empty and the conversation had slowed to the family's safe topics, weather, the neighbor's lawn, a harmless joke about the mail arriving late, I lifted my chin. "I have something to share," I said, the words measured and even. "I got into the School of the Art Institute of Chicago." My mother's fork clicked against her plate. My sister paused, then let out a soft breath through her nose, the sound a smirk makes when it wants to be polite. My father didn't blink. "They offered me a partial scholarship," I added, because facts matter. "It's competitive. They liked my portfolio." He set down the carving knife and folded his hands. "Art." He didn't shape it into a question. He sounded as if he had bitten an olive and found a pit. "Yes," I said. "Design, painting, mixed media. I'll work part-time to cover the rest. I've started—" He raised his palm. "Stop." He looked at my sister as if to confirm something, then back to me. "We are a family of substance, law, medicine, accounting, work that stands up in daylight and pays what it owes." "Creative work pays," I said. "It can. I've already lined up a job at a cafe and I'll—" "Enough." He leaned forward. The tendons in his neck drew lines like warning signs. "You are a bright girl when you want to be. You could do something respectable. Instead, you chase a hobby." "It's not a hobby," I said. My voice didn't rise. "You've never looked at my work." "I've seen the mess," he said. "I see the stains on the table and the pencils in the couch cushions. I see bills. I don't see a future." "You see a future for her," I said, and glanced at my sister because pretending wasn't going to save me now. "You always have." "She has earned it," he said. "I earned this," I said. "They chose me." He brought his hands together as if he were collecting an argument into a small, hard ball. "You have a roof over your head because I put it there. You eat because I pay for groceries. You will not use my house as a staging ground for foolishness." "Dad," I said gently, "I'm 18. "Exactly," he said, and for a heartbeat I thought the word meant freedom. It didn't. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the place card again, the one that said guest, and set it upright in front of me as if we had agreed to the label. "You are a guest," he said, "in more ways than one." Then he let the last sentence fall like a lid on a box. "Parasite. That's what you are if you stay the way you're going." The air thinned. A knife slid from a plate and clinked against porcelain. My mother's eyes closed and opened as if she'd been bracing for a wave. My sister touched the bracelet and looked at the salt shaker. I didn't cry. Anger tries to borrow tears to spend on the wrong purchase. I kept my voice low. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, "Do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyway." I applied because it was right for me. I'll take care of the rest with work. I'm not asking for— "You're not listening." His chair scraped back. He stood, and the ceiling light put a hard edge on his jaw. "I won't finance a fantasy. You want to be an adult? Be one." "I am being one," I said. He shook his head as if I'd offered him the wrong change. "Adults don't ask for applause when they haven't done anything." "I didn't ask for applause," I said. "I asked for respect." "Respect," he repeated, tasting the word like it might be spoiled. He looked at my mother. "Clara." She folded her napkin and set it on the table. Nothing else. He turned to me. "You will not bring chaos into this house." I glanced around the room. The portraits looked back, my childhood trapped in glass, Easter dresses, a science fair ribbon I'd held like it belonged to someone else. I stood. My hands were steady. I had learned how to hold them that way. He walked down the hall and came back with my suitcase, the small floral one from middle school recitals, and set it by the front door. The zipper had a frayed thread that tickled my palm when I took the handle. He opened the door. Rain had gathered itself into a quiet, patient curtain. He didn't look at me when he said it. He gave the words to the air. "You'll be back in a month," begging. My sister leaned close enough that her breath touched my ear. "Told you you'd fail," she whispered, the kind of whisper people use in church so they won't get scolded by God. My mother's hand lifted an inch off the table and then went still. If she had spoken my name, she swallowed it. I stepped over the threshold. The smell of wet concrete and grass rose to meet me. He took the suitcase from my hand, set it outside, and shut the door. The deadbolt slid into place with a sound like a gavel. That click drove a boundary through my life I could never sand down. I stood on the porch and listened to the rain insist on itself. The porch light made a soft circle around my feet. I picked up the suitcase. Its wheels complained down the steps. My dress clung at the knees. The cold found the thin places in my sleeves and pressed its hands there. I didn't knock. I didn't plead. Begging is a language you learn once and cannot unlearn. I wasn't going to pick it up. The street was the same street it had always been. Mailboxes with little red flags, the neighbor's maple leaning politely over the sidewalk, driveways that told stories about who mowed on Saturdays and who hired a service. Tonight, those ordinary things looked like props on a stage that had forgotten its scene. I walked. The suitcase rocked and rattled behind me, a stubborn child late for bed. Rain ticked against my ears and ran along my scalp behind my collarbone. Water found the seams of my shoes and took up residence. I passed the Miller's living room window and saw a game show glow. The host held up a car key and a smile, a man who believed the world always works out if you guess the right price. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked and was shushed. Someone's dryer thumped. The suburb went on being itself, quiet, private, convinced. At the corner, I stopped under a streetlight. The light hummed the way old lights hum, content to be useful. I set the suitcase upright and rested my hands on the handle to stop them from trembling. I thought of the guidance counselor who once told me, "If home isn't safe, call." I could have called police, a hotline, a friend with a couch, but I didn't want a siren to write this story for me. I wanted my own pen. I had already decided to take the cafe job on weekends. The scholarship letter had a number I could call to switch my mailing address. There were steps. Adults take steps even when the floor wobbles. "I could go back and apologize," I said out loud, because sometimes you have to hear the worst option to throw it away. The rain answered with its patient applause. "No," I told the rain, "not tonight, not ever." That sounded dramatic in the quiet, but it wasn't drama. It was a plan. In America, we like to say, "Put it in writing." I would. If I couldn't put respect in my father's ledger, I would put my own name on things that mattered. I looked up at the house one more time. The front windows glowed their familiar squares. Behind the glass, my mother would be rinsing plates under warm water, setting each one into the rack as if nothing delicate had broken. My father would be putting the carving knife away in its slot, his motions exact. My sister would be tapping her phone, composing a text that would not include my name. My grandmother Erwin's voice found me the way good voices do, without effort. "Paint your truth," she used to say when I was little and didn't know how to name the ache in my chest. "Even if they hate it, it will love you back." I wrapped that sentence around my shoulders like a dry towel and held it there. My suitcase handle squeaked when I tilted it toward the curb. I took a step, then another, then let my feet find a pace I could keep. At the end of the driveway, I turned because we always turn at thresholds. It's human. A bead of water ran down my cheek and into my mouth. Rain tastes like pennies when your heart is beating too fast. I didn't wipe it away. 10 years later, I'd still hear that deadbolt in my dreams. Streetlights hummed like tired bees, while rain stitched the block into one long gray curtain. I pulled my suitcase off the porch and started down the sidewalk. The wheels rattled over the seams in the concrete, a nervous rhythm that gave me away. I kept my eyes on the line where the curb met the gutter, the way you do when you're trying not to look at doorways that just closed. Windows along the street breathed a soft blue, television glow washing across living rooms. Curtains shifted. A silhouette paused, then stepped back. On the corner, a sedan slowed beside me, the driver's face bright in the dashboard light. He looked once, looked again, decided it wasn't his business, and eased on through the four-way stop. The Midwest is polite right up to the edge of involvement. I passed the Miller's mailbox with its red flag still up. Somewhere behind their siding, a game show audience clapped at the right time. A dog barked 2 houses down, a sharp, dutiful sound, then someone hissed, "Hush!" and order returned. Water dripped from the maple leaves in slow, cold taps onto my shoulders. My birthday dress clung like I'd made a bad bet, and the house had taken its due. In this country, I told myself, have to hear a voice that didn't sound like his. People mind their business, especially after 9, especially in the rain. The words didn't sting as much as they clarified. When someone shows you who they are, that's a courtesy. Believe them and plan accordingly. The suitcase handle squeaked. My palms were raw where the plastic dug in. I could have called for help, dialed a hotline, or scrolled my contacts for the friend who always said, "You can crash here." I didn't. Pride gets a bad reputation, but there is a kind that stands you up, keeps you moving to the next safe porch light. Mine did that now. Halfway down the block, a light clicked on across the street. Not the harsh glare of a motion sensor, warm, amber, steady, the kind of bulb people keep because it makes faces look kinder. The front door opened a cautious hand's width. A woman stepped into view, cardigan wrapped tight, house shoes at the edge of the mat. She lifted her chin in a hello that didn't demand a response. "Do you need a towel?" she called, voice practical, as if I were a neighbor who'd gotten caught in the sprinklers. I stopped at the end of her walkway. Distance felt like a seatbelt. Rain patted the brim of the porch roof and made a small river along her steps. "I don't want to be a nuisance," I said, because polite training sits closer to the surface than blood. "Honey," she said, easing the door wider but not closing the gap between us, "a towel isn't a contract." I looked back at my parents' house. No faces in the window, just the tasteful drapes we used to draw before opening gifts on Christmas Eve. The light at my feet was a circle that had room for 1 person and a suitcase. The light across the street was big enough for 2. I did the quick math women do. Exit routes, visibility, neighbors within shouting distance. My phone battery, 12%. My keys, not helpful, but habits inventory themselves. The woman took 1 step back from the door, hands in clear sight. That tiny motion felt like a doorbell I could trust. People who mean well leave you a lane. "If this is pity," I said, "I'll keep walking. If this is dignity, you'll take the towel and decide about the rest from a dry place," she said. "Up to you." I crossed the street. The entryway smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. A rubber mat waited for shoes. A basket of umbrellas leaned in a corner beside a framed print that read, "One day at a time." She didn't reach for me. She reached for the towel on a chair and set it on the edge of the mat. "I'm Isoria," she said, then added, "Most folks say Mrs. Easier." "Ella," I said, "I won't stay long." "That's the beauty of towels," she said. "They're useful either way." She pointed down the hall. "Bathrooms left, charger by the console table, kettle's on if you want tea." I set my suitcase against the wall and stood on the mat, rain sliding off my sleeves in tiny rivers. The clean towel was thick, hotel weight, the kind you fold in thirds so it stacks right. I pressed it to my hair and felt my scalp relax. Somewhere deeper in the house, a thermostat clicked and the vents whispered on. She handed me a cardigan from a hook, oversized, warm, the kind of knit that had already helped someone else. "No rush," she said, stepping back to give me space to put it on. "You don't have to explain yet." "Thank you," I said. The words landed with an ease that told me they were the right currency here. She filled a mug and set it at the corner of a small table by the window. The steam curled cinnamon and something floral into the room. "A sit if you want," she said, "or stand if sitting feels like losing altitude." I took the chair but stayed perched on its edge, as if that might help me leave cleanly later. My phone blinked. I set it face down, then halfway changed my mind and put it face up where I could see it. Safety is as much choreography as instinct. I drafted a text to a friend, "Safe with a neighbor, will update," and left it unsent, thumb hovering, then lighting the screen off. Across the street, a door slammed hard enough to cough the rain. A voice, his, rose, then cut itself off, the way people do when they realize sound carries. I felt the old reflex rise, the one that told me to stand still and shrink. I didn't obey it. Mrs. Y reached for the curtain and drew it halfway across the window, not hiding me, declaring a line. "If anyone comes over here," she said, "I'll ask them to leave. If they don't, I'll call the non-emergency line. We keep numbers on the fridge for a reason." "You don't have to get involved," I said, reflex again. "Kiddo," she said, not unkind. "Not getting involved is how bruises get old." I swallowed. The mug warmed my hands into believing in circulation again. She glanced at my suitcase. "Do you need to document anything? Time? Condition? Who said what?" The part of me my grandmother raised clicked into place. I pulled out my phone, snapped photos, the suitcase wet enough to darken the floral pattern, water clock on the microwave, rain tracking down the storm door, a screenshot of the time. I opened a folder and typed a name that felt like a decision. Keys. "Paper before panic," I said. "That's a good one," she answered. "Write down where you heard it so you can cite it later." We sat with the sound of the kettle rattling very softly on its base. I heard the quiet thud of a washer cycle ending somewhere down the hall. The house had the tidy hum of a place that trusts itself. My shoulders remembered what down felt like and settled. "I can offer one night on the couch," she said. "Shoes off, charger's yours, bathroom down the hall. No questions yet. Hydrate. Text someone you trust. Sleep." "I'll earn it," I said, because that was what rose. "This isn't a ledger," she said. And then, softening the line so I'd hear the second meaning, "But I won't stop you from wiping down the baseboards tomorrow if it gets you through a tough morning." I smiled despite the wobble in me. "Deal." She handed over a folded bath sheet and pointed at the guest bathroom. "You can shower if you want. Towels in the cabinet. If you don't, the couch blanket is clean. I'll pull it out." I took the bath sheet and the cardigan deeper onto my shoulders. "Before I sit on anything," I said, half joking, half serious, "I should stop raining." "There's a trick to it," she said. "Hot water and a door that latches." I didn't want to be out of sight with a stranger in the house, and she knew it. "Leave the door cracked and sing," she added. "I'll assume you're fine unless you hit a high note and crash into furniture." I laughed, a short, watery thing, but true. "I'll keep the chorus simple." The bathroom mirror gave me a version of myself I recognized from bad lighting at school dances. Hair plastered, dress soggy, eyes too wide. I turned on the water and warmed my hands, then decided I wasn't ready to take my dress off in a house that wasn't mine. I dried my hair and arms, pulled the cardigan on, and wrapped the bath sheet around my shoulders like a cape. When I came back, the living room looked like itself again. Afghan folded, couch cleared, a small stack of index cards and a pen on the coffee table. "If you want to write anything down before you sleep," she said, "ink holds up better than memory at 2 a.m. I sat, tucked my feet under the hem of the bath sheet, and wrote, "Rain, suitcase outside, guest card, parasite, deadbolt." I didn't annotate feelings. Facts first. Feelings could stand in line behind them. From across the street, the sound of our garage door heaved, then settled. No footsteps on the sidewalk. No knocking. Silence, but not peace. Peace has a different weight. "Do you have family nearby?" she asked, keeping her eyes on the kettle as if the question were a passing weather report. "Yes," I said, and left it there. "Do you have work lined up?" "A cafe on Maple," I said. "I'll confirm hours tomorrow. I can pay a small amount for—" She raised a hand. "Next week's problem deserves next week. Tonight's problem is your core temperature." I sipped tea. Cinnamon, a line of citrus, something floral that made the kitchen smell like a memory I couldn't place. "You keep the good heavy towels," I said. "They were my husband's favorites," she said. "He was one of those men who believed in nice linens, said life's easier when basics aren't arguing with you." "He sounds wise." "He learned the hard way," she said, and that was all. The clock above the stove turned its hands with a polite tick. Time kept behaving, even if people didn't. She glanced at the front door again, then at me. "For tonight, ground rules. No loud calls. If you need to contact someone, text is best. If a vehicle stops out front, you don't answer the door. I do. In the morning, we'll have oatmeal. Eat first, then we talk." "That's fair." She held my gaze for a long second, the kind adults use when they're checking for fractures you're not saying out loud. "And if you change your mind at 3 a.m. and want to leave," she added, "leave. I won't be offended. I'll just think, there goes a smart girl who trusts her instincts." We moved through small tasks, shoes on a mat, cardigan sleeves rolled, phone plugged in by the console. She set a glass of water on a coaster, the kind of coaster you only own if you love your furniture. I tucked the towel into my suitcase in a clean, dry corner, which felt silly until I realized I wanted proof the kindness had happened. From the kitchen, a soft, mechanical beep sounded, her washer telling her the load was done. She didn't go check it. She stayed where she was, a steady figure in a gray sweater, a person who didn't let appliances boss her around at night. "Can I ask one question?" I said. "You can ask," she said. "I can also say tomorrow if I need to." "What made you turn on your light?" She shrugged, small. "Rain on a birthday looks different." "How did you know it was my—" She lifted an eyebrow toward the damp sash across my collarbone, the way mascara had taken a small vacation south. "Call it experience," she said. "Call it the way a block learns the rhythm of its families." We let that rest. Somewhere a police siren wailed very far away, a thread pulled through a different part of town. My phone buzzed once, an automated spam, a bright lie about extended warranties, then went quiet. Street water ticked through the downspout and into the little square of gravel at the bottom, each drip a small punctuation mark. "I can't pay you back for the towel," I said, "but I will someday." "Most debts worth having are paid forward," she said. Then, because being kind doesn't mean being careless, she added, "If you stay past one night, we'll write down some terms, not to trap you, to keep both of us clear." "That sounds sane," I said. The word sane felt luxurious. "Clarity lets people stay human," she said. "Chaos tilts the table." The couch was softer than it looked. The cardigan smelled like cedar drawers and laundry soap. My shoulder blades let go one at a time. I tried to picture morning, gray light in the blinds, coffee, a shower I might actually take, a job interview where I could say, "Yes, I can start this week." It wasn't a plan yet, but it was the shape of one. I folded the index cards under the edge of the coaster and set the pen on top. Mrs. Y disappeared down the hall and turned off the kitchen light, leaving the lamp by the window to make its small island of gold. She came back and stood by the doorway with her arms folded soft, not locked. "In the morning," she said, "there's something I want to show you. It helped my household when we were in a bind. It might help you start yours." "What is it?" I asked. "A thing that looks like nothing," she said. "But things that look like nothing sometimes hold the most weight." "I'm listening," I said. "Not tonight," she said. "Sleep is also a kind of document. It records that you made it through." I closed my eyes for a minute to test the couch. I opened them because the house across the street flickered in my mind. My mother stacking plates, my father filing knives, my sister composing an angle, and realized that falling asleep might feel like losing the argument. Then I exhaled and let that go. Not everything is an argument. Some nights are simply bridges. I drew the bath sheet to my chin. The rain slackened. A late car passed. Tires whispered through the shallow water along the curb. The lamp buzzed the way old lamps do. For the first time since the door shut, my jaw unclenched. I didn't know if morning would bring work or more weather, but I knew there would be light because I could see it from here. I didn't know a spoon could change a life, but she was about to hand me one. Morning came cautious and kind. The storm smell lingered in the curtains like a last apology, and the house settled into its ordinary creaks. I woke on the couch with the cardigan tucked high at my neck and a glass of water half full on the coaster. For a second, I didn't know where I was. Then the quiet told me. This was a place that expected people to be safe inside it. "Up for breakfast?" Mrs. Y called from the kitchen, as if we'd been doing this for years. I sat up, combed my fingers through my damp hair, and followed the sound of the kettle. The table by the small window held 2 bowls and a folded dish towel. Steam rose from a pot on the stove, making the room feel like it had a heartbeat. She slid a bowl toward me and, with the same motion, eased a small silver spoon across the surface of the table. "Eat first," she said. "Then we talk." The spoon was heavier than it looked. It caught the light in a thin line down the handle where initials were scratched deep. J.Y. The oatmeal smelled faintly of cinnamon and warm milk. Nothing fancy. Exactly right. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice low because the room felt like a library. She poured tea into a plain white mug and took the chair opposite me. "There's honey if you like. The packets are from a church breakfast I didn't end up attending. Long story." I didn't pry. I lifted the spoon and tasted. Heat spread from my tongue to my ribs. My shoulders settled a fraction. In this country, people like to say, "You can't pour from an empty cup." I'd always nodded at the phrase without believing it applied to me. This morning I believed it. It turns out a bowl can do the job, too. I turned the spoon to see the engraving again. "Did you get this at a flea market?" "No," she said, and the word had a softness to it that made me put the spoon down. "It belonged to my husband. He lost most foods during chemo. This was the one thing I could offer that stayed, 1 teaspoon at a time." When you feed someone that way, you learn patience and you learn measurements. "I don't want to take something you need," I said. "I have enough," she answered, simple. And some things travel better than people think. We hang on to odd little survivors, dog tags, a sobriety chip, a church bulletin with a phone number circled. They help us remember we made it through something. She inclined her head toward the spoon. "This helped us. It can help you." "I'll treat it like a loan," I said. "Not a favor. I'll treat it like a signed agreement." "That's a very Ella sentence," she said. "All right then. A loan. Due back when you don't need it." I ate in steady rhythm, the way you do when you realize you haven't had real food in hours and your body is both grateful and suspicious. Outside, the last drops fell from the eaves in measured ticks. Inside, the kettle settled into its slow breath. She didn't ask what happened. She also didn't pretend not to notice something had. "There are 2 ways to start a day after a night like yours," she said finally. "One is to retell it until you're hoarse. The other is to write it down and do the next necessary thing." I started a folder on my phone, I said. Photos, timestamps, names, notes. That's the second way, she said, approval quiet and solid. Documents tell the story when voices shake. I finished the bowl and rested the spoon on the dish towel. It left a small crescent of oatmeal behind, a pale moon. What do we do next? We put fences around the day, she said, standing. Fences that keep the right things in. The living room had a dry erase board leaning against a bookcase, divided into days of the week and blank lines beneath each. She uncapped a marker, then handed it to me. Write your first name at the top. It makes it official without making it heavy. I printed ELLA and stepped back. It looked both temporary and permanent at once, exactly how I felt. Here's what I can offer, she said. Couch for a week, shower, washer on Wednesday and Saturday, Wi-Fi every day. In exchange, you take care of the little lawn out front, vacuum the living room, wipe windows on Thursday, and put the trash out Tuesday night. Quiet hours after 10. For your safety, you text one person you trust each night that you're okay. She paused. And we revisit in 7 days. If you need more time and it still makes sense for both of us, we renew. That's fair, I said. I'll find shifts. If I can't pay anything by next week, I'll look at a shelter. She tapped the cap of the marker against her palm, thinking. Give it 2 weeks before that. The library is hiring aides, and the cafe 2 blocks down puts a help wanted sign in the window more often than not. She glanced at the red neon clock on the microwave. And you'll eat here tonight, so don't let pride make you refuse supper. Pride can keep dignity. It doesn't have to starve it. We shook hands. Her skin was cool and dry. Mine was still a little warm from the tea. The handshake held for 1 extra second and then let go, and I felt something steady pass between us. Agreement without ceremony. Initial the chores, she said. I wrote my initials in tiny, stubborn letters next to each task. It was silly and also not. I hadn't signed anything for myself in a long time. Signing served as a spine. She plucked a pad of index cards from the bookcase and wrote in neat block letters, Wi-Fi password, her cell, the number for the church pantry, the schedule for the community bus, and, because she was thorough, the number for the non-emergency police line. This isn't to make you nervous, she said as she handed it to me. It's to stop your brain from playing what if when you should be sleeping. Thank you, I said. The card felt like a tiny map you could fold and tuck into a pocket without anyone knowing you needed a map. Now, she said, write down what you want to get done by sunset. I wrote, print resume at the library, ask at Green Bean Cafe, price a thrift store blouse, update scholarship mailing address. When I finished, I looked at the list and felt my pulse settle into a pace I recognized. Plans don't solve problems, but they make your feet move in the right direction. She led me to the closet by the hall and pulled down a corkboard with bus routes pinned across it like an old-fashioned battle plan. Blue line gets you to the library. Transfer here, she said, tapping a push pin. And if your phone dies, the driver will still let you off 2 blocks past the park if you ask politely. Polite still exists in this town. Use it. I will, I said. Before you go, she added, take 5 minutes to back up your photos to email. Then rename the files so you can find them when you're tired. We sat briefly at the console table while I plugged in my phone and sent myself the images from last night. Suitcase wet, porch light, the microwave clock, the curtained window. I renamed each 2010-06-18_suitcase_rain, 2010-06-18_time, _2157, 2010-06-18, _porch_view. Then I wrote a short note to myself in the email body. Kicked out at roughly 9:20 p.m. Neighbor offered towel and couch. No contact from parents since. Feelings to be written later. Sending that message to my own inbox Felt like raising a hand in a room where I trusted the moderator. Plan the work, she said, rinsing the oatmeal pot. Then work the plan. I repeated it so it would stick. Plan the work, then work the plan. We stepped back into the living room, and I wiped the tiny water rings my glass had left on the table without being asked. She noticed and didn't make a fuss, which told me she'd noticed. Tell me one thing you're good at that has nothing to do with what happened last night, she said, almost as an afterthought. Details, I said. I see them even when people don't want me to. Useful, she said, replacing the dry erase cap with a decisive click. Details keep people honest and keep you from stepping into holes. When I washed my bowl at the sink, she didn't wave me off. She handed me a dish towel and let me dry, and we found an easy rhythm. Rinse, hand off, stack. It's funny how quickly an ordinary chore can make a place feel possible. I gathered my bag. She watched me fold the cardigan into it, and then, with a little tilt of her head, said, "Take the cardigan. Bring it back when you don't need it." "I'll bring it back clean," I said. "I expect nothing less," she answered, and I believed her. She pulled open a drawer and brought out a narrow paper sleeve. "For that," she said, nodding at the spoon. "It'll keep it from scratching the inside of your bag." I slid the spoon, ridiculous and perfect, into the paper like a precious letter. It made just the faintest whisper. I wrapped it again in a paper towel and tucked it beside my phone. "I feel a little silly," I admitted. "Silly is cheaper than replacing what matters," she said. Before I left, she pressed another index card into my hand. On it, besides the numbers, she'd written 2 lines. "Eat when you can. Decide when you're steady." I tucked it behind my ID in my wallet so I couldn't pay for anything without seeing it. We moved to the front door together. She opened it and stood to the side, a small courtesy that gave me the first step. Daylight had pushed the storm to the edges of the sky, and the sidewalk shone clean. Lawns wore a bright, rinsed green. My parents' house across the street looked like a photograph in a real estate listing. Tight, quiet, almost convincing. "Ready?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Thank you for the couch." "You're not a couch," she replied, the corner of her mouth tipping up. "You're a person, but if you want to thank me, you can start by flipping the cushions this afternoon so we can vacuum underneath." "I'll do it," I said, surprised by the relief that came with having something ordinary to promise. "Go get your steps in," she said. "Bring back a story that ends with a schedule." I stepped out into the new air. The neighborhood had gone back to pretending nothing happened. I had decided not to play along. The sidewalk felt less like a runway and more like a road. I followed the route she'd traced on the corkboard in my head, past the park, around the corner by the post office, 2 blocks to Maple. I rehearsed what I would say if someone asked about experience: church coffee hours, school events, reliable with a till, learn quick, start soon, keep it true, keep it short. At the corner, a red neon sign blinked in the cafe window: "Help wanted." I wiped my palms on the cardigan, pushed the door, and heard the bell. The red neon sign in the window blinked to life and then steadied, as if the cafe itself had taken a breath and decided to say yes. Maple Avenue still wore last night's rain in the seams of its bricks, and the bell over the door gave a bright, old-fashioned jingle when I pushed in. Coffee and warm pastry air found me first, then the rhythm of an espresso machine purging steam in short sighs. Behind the counter, a woman with a tidy bun and a name tag that simply read Marta looked up from the register. "Experience?" she asked. No hello, no fuss, straight to inventory. "School bake sale lines," I said. "Church coffee hours. I'm quick with change, quicker at learning." "Good. Grab that tray." She nodded toward 2 paper cups waiting under a warming lamp. "Walk it to table 4 without spilling. Then wipe down 3. Last, count back change from 5 to 150 without a calculator." I slid my fingers under the tray, found its balance, and let my shoulders drop a fraction to meet the weight. Table 4 sat by the front window. A man in a ball cap scrolled his phone and didn't look up when I placed the cups. The cloth at table 3 stuck and then smoothed, sugar crystals catching the light before they disappeared. At the register, I counted back coins, each placement deliberate. 250, 3, 4, and 5. Marta watched my hands, not my face, which I respected. She gave one quick nod. Minimum wage, closing shifts likely, no drama, no phones at the register. Bring a copy of your ID tomorrow. Understood, I said. You can start now, she added, already turning toward a growl from the grinder. Apron's on the hook. I slipped the apron loop over my head and tied it tight at my waist. Luck favors the prepared mind, my chemistry teacher used to say before quizzes, a line I'd rolled my eyes at then. Today it sounded like advice from someone who wanted me to keep my dignity. I made a quiet list in my head. Smile without offering apologies, watch how the veterans move, do the next right thing, and then the one after that. The regulars had their own weather systems. A woman with a laptop and 2 highlighters made a neat storm at the corner table. A delivery driver stepped in with warehouse dust still on his boots and asked for black with room without breaking stride. The chalkboard specials were written in a tidy hand. Maple latte, blueberry scones, a quote underlined in chalk. Measure twice, cut once. The tip jar beside it wore a strip of masking tape that said, College Fund, hours. I heard a couple chuckle, the kind of laugh that means we will add $1 because we like being in on the joke. An older barista with a tight ponytail brushed past me to reach for lids. Her eyebrow flicked over my borrowed cardigan and the damp seam at the cuff. Princess got kicked out of the castle? She said, not quite sotto voce. I didn't stop my hands. Sleeves rolled, rag folded, the counter circled in figure 8s the way I'd watched Marta do it once already. Today I earn mine, I said. Even tone, no extra frosting. Marta cut a glance in our direction that said, work, don't escalate. The couple by the window kept their eyes on the weather forecast. Public silence feels familiar when you grow up in it. The difference today was that I was on payroll. That was a small but important fact, and facts are sturdier than sympathy. I learned the melody of the machine quickly, the grind's rough purr, the tamp, the brief resistance when the portafilter locked, the hiss that meant the shot had landed right. I learned the micro-timing between pouring and foaming, the angle that kept the milk from screaming, the small swirl that turned a latte surface into a field where you could paint a heart without making it look foolish. My fingers remembered how to move without shaking when they had work. Don't chip your manicure, the senior barista said later as I reached for a stack of hot sleeves. What if I had one, I said, and showed her the raw half-moons on my palms where the suitcase handle had rubbed skin thin. I didn't hold the hands up high, just enough for the truth to do the speaking. A regular in a flannel jacket left 2 singles in the jar and met my eyes for a second. Good hustle, he said. Appreciate you, I answered, because gratitude is a language worth learning. The afternoon slid into its own steady cadence. I memorized 3 quick names, Jill with the laptop, Josh with the cap, Mr. Talbot, who liked a half-calf Americano and said, "Thank you, miss," as if it were part of his order. The bell over the door stretched its voice and yawned whenever people arrived in pairs. Between the morning rush and the late lunchers, there were 5 minutes where everything paused, and I topped off the napkin dispensers and refilled the sugar caddies the way Marta had shown me. 2 scoops, shake, settle. She checked the till at 2 and again at 4, head bent, pen tapping the counter in a quiet metronome. Drawer balances, no shortages, she said once, not looking up. In this place, approval lived in understatement. On my first 15-minute break, I stepped next door to the drugstore, fingers counting the minutes and coins. A clear plastic folder sat in a wire rack by the greeting cards. The kind students buy at the start of semesters when everything still feels possible. I paid for it, and a cheap pack of sticky notes. At the coffee shop's back counter, where the managers kept schedules tacked under magnets shaped like coffee beans, I wrote one word on a scrap of label, then stuck it to the spine. Keys. Inside, the folder made a crisp sound. I slid in the copy of my timesheet that Marta printed and handed me with a pen. I added the wage sheet she'd folded on thin paper, the sticky note with tomorrow's hours. The $2 tip receipt went in too, not because it changed my bank balance, but because it recorded that something had been given and received at a specific time on a specific day. Timestamps tell stories without flinching. My hands ached, so I took photos, my palms open on the break room counter, the cafe clock behind them, the chalkboard date out in the front, with the sunlight slicing across the maple latte. I emailed the images to myself with subject lines that made sense. 2010-0619 _ green bean _ first shift _ 1515 2010-0619 _ hands _ ache 2010-0619 _ closing _ clock. I added a screenshot of the bus route I'd taken from Mrs. Y's and a tiny checklist I drafted on my phone. Socks, Band-Aids, granola bar, extra hair tie. Systems don't cure worry, but they keep it from interrupting. Back on the floor, the senior barista stacked mugs and made a small show of setting them down a little louder than necessary. "Don't expect anyone to save you," she tossed over her shoulder as I mopped a narrow rectangle near the pastry case. "I'm saving myself," I said, not unkind. "You'll see it on the schedule." She looked like she wanted to volley another shot, then chose to align the cups instead. I finished the square of floor, back and forth in slow, sensible strokes, and kept my face turned toward the work. This was not a stage. It was a counter, and counters reward repetition more than performance. At 6, a teen girl came in with her mother, both hair pulled into matching ponytails, and ordered hot chocolate and a small drip with cream. The mother's hands shook when she reached for her wallet, and I pretended not to notice except to steady the lid before I slid it onto the cup. People don't always need you to announce that you see them. They need you to hand them what they asked for without making them feel examined. By 7, the cafe settled into its evening voice, lower, the grinder off more than on, the doorbell chimes farther apart. Marta closed out the last half hour with the speed of someone who had taught herself to do 2 things at once without dropping either. She double-checked that the milk dates were in front, counted the till again, and tucked the deposit slip in a zippered bag. "Sign here," she said, sliding the timesheet copy toward me and placing her pen next to it at an angle that meant I should not wander. I signed and added the date in small, tidy numerals. The paper made the tiniest scratch sound where the pen bit into it. I folded the copy and slid it into keys. Not a victory lap, just process. The best kind of relief can hide inside ordinary motions. "Your change drawer was clean," she said, softer now. "Good eye with the lids." "Thank you," I said. The words were the same shape they'd been at breakfast, but now they sat lower in my throat, weighted with a different kind of proof. "Tomorrow," she said, tapping the schedule. "Open at 8, you at 9. I'll be here." I wiped the last ring of water off the back counter and made the mop water swirl into a tidy funnel in the bucket. The bell over the door rang once more, and a young couple stepped in, laughter trailing behind them like a ribbon. Marta held up a hand to say, "We're closed," and they backed out with a little pantomime of apology. I untied my apron, smoothed the crease where it had cut at my waist, and slid it onto the hook. Outside, the air smelled like wet sidewalks and coffee grounds. I texted Mrs. Y. "Closing done. Home soon." My thumb hovered and then added, "Thank you for the spoon." It helped. I didn't send a photo. The spoon in its paper sleeve had waited in my bag all day, like a little anchor that didn't need bragging. Behind me, the senior barista was wiping a streak that didn't need wiping. She looked at my cardigan again and seemed to think better of whatever she was going to say. Maybe she'd realized blisters can undo a lot of assumptions. Or maybe she'd just run out of energy for being unkind. Fatigue is sometimes mercy in disguise. "Good night," I said to Marta. She raised 2 fingers in a small salute. "See you at 9. I stepped to the door, pushed it open, and the bell sang its bright, uncomplicated note. The first steps onto the sidewalk felt like a small landing, nothing cinematic, only my feet and a square of concrete that had held 100 departures. "Don't expect anyone to save you," the other voice had said earlier. I repeated the line inside my head and changed the pronouns to suit me. I don't expect anyone to save me. I expect myself to keep my word. It wasn't melodrama, just a promise I knew I could afford. The neon sign clicked off. The streetlights flicked on in their own time, a wobble, then a hum. I tightened my tote strap on my shoulder and adjusted the folder so it sat flat against my hip. Today, I had earned my bread, my place in a schedule, my signature on a timesheet. Small wins add up if you keep them in one place. At the door, the bell rang again. Only this time it was my sister's voice I heard behind me. "Don't make this harder on Mom," Celiora said, the words smooth as glass and twice as cold. The bell over the cafe door was still vibrating when I stepped outside. The evening air smelled faintly of rain mixed with coffee grounds that had drifted out with me. I adjusted the strap of my tote on my shoulder, squared my stance, and only then noticed her. Celiora stood beneath the awning, dry in her neat coat, arms folded like she'd been waiting long enough to grow roots. The sight of her didn't surprise me. She liked entrances that were exits for someone else. "Don't make this harder on Mom," she said. The words had the smoothness of something practiced in a mirror. I didn't step back. "I'm working," I replied, steady. That helps her more than silence. Her eyes narrowed. "You always pick the dramatic route." "No." I lifted my chin. "I picked the verifiable one." She shifted, scanning my apron, the faint damp seam at my cardigan. The corners of her mouth tilted the way people smile when they know they've drawn blood. I kept my posture straight, tote strap high on my shoulder. Boundaries aren't speeches, they're behaviors. "You need a ride?" she asked finally, tone thick with false generosity. "I'll walk." I nodded toward the glass where Marta, the manager, was visible counting the till. A neutral witness, another fact in my pocket. "Suit yourself." She let the words slide off her tongue as she turned away. Over her shoulder came a low mutter, not meant to be missed. "Always begging for attention." I logged the phrase silently in my mind. Patterns matter. Patterns predict. When I got back to Mrs. Y's living room, the lamp by the window was glowing, making the card table look like a hearth. My phone buzzed before I'd set down my tote. I unlocked it, thumb cold against the screen. Celiora's name flashed at the top. The text, "Scholarship? Please, pity case at best." I let the screen burn into my eyes for 3 slow breaths. Then I did what I had already trained myself to do, screenshot. A rename. Save. I tapped edit, typed in the file name, S9_PDCase_20100619_2224.png, and slid it into the folder labeled Keys. Then I composed an email to myself with the screenshot attached, subject line precise. Documentation. Sister comment. In the body, I typed the time, the location, and noted the earlier confrontation under the awning. No adjectives, just the skeleton of truth. "If it isn't written, it didn't happen," I muttered. A phrase I'd heard in civics class once, half ignored then, wholly mine now. My thumb hovered over reply. I didn't send one. Non-engagement is not cowardice, it's strategy. Mrs. Y set down a mug of tea on the side table near me. The steam lifted cinnamon into the room again. Paper before panic, she said quietly, as if reading my mind. I nodded and breathed through the sting until it cooled enough to file. By morning, the rain smell had faded, replaced by the faint tang of fresh-cut grass from down the block. I walked to the Grand Rapids Public Library, shoes squeaking faintly on the wet pavement, my toad against my side like a shield. The doors opened with a hush, and the cool air inside felt like reprieve. At the front desk, I signed up for a guest print card. 10 cents a page. Enough. The computer hum was steady, rows of screens reflecting soft blue across the reading tables. I logged into my email and saw it. Subject line glowing, official and absolute. Congratulations on your scholarship award. I clicked it open. The PDF loaded slowly, as if it knew the weight it carried. I checked every line. My name, student ID, award amount, term start, and then my stomach tightened. The mailing address on file. My parents' house. Address needs updating. Today, I whispered. I pulled a small notebook from my bag and scribbled registrar phone hours, drafting the script I would use. Name, Idaho, request for update. Keep it professional. Keep it brief. I clicked print. The machine whirred, and warm paper slid out into the tray. I printed 2 copies. One I stapled top left and slid into the keys folder behind my timesheet and tip receipt. The other I clipped with a red binder clip I'd picked up at the drugstore counter on the way in. A visual signal, bold against white paper. Proof visible. Evidence is the loudest voice in the room, I reminded myself. My hands steadied on the edges of the paper, no longer shaking. At the librarian's desk, I asked her to initial the margin. She did so casually, unaware she'd just signed her name to a document that would hold up longer than any argument my family could throw at me. I annotated the page with the date, time, and printer location. Facts are currency. I intended to be solvent. In a quiet corner, I dialed the financial aid office, the hold music scratchy in my ear. I rehearsed my voicemail script under my breath. This is Ella, student ID, ####, calling to confirm mailing address change. Please call back at... I clicked the pen against the page to mark each beat. I called the registrar, waded through a series of polite prompts, and left the same neat script. I called orientation to confirm dates. Each task ended in a check mark on my list, the ink crisp against the index card. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Y. Eat. Big brains need fuel. I smiled despite the tightness still coiled in my chest. Downstairs, the vending machine offered a banana for $1. I bought it, peeled it in 2 clean motions, and chewed slowly. Needs before narratives. Always. The red clip peeked out from my tote as I slid the folder back in. For the first time in days, I felt like I was carrying more than belongings. I was carrying a flag. It might be small, but it was planted. That night, back at Mrs. Y's, I sat at the kitchen table with the spoon beside me, the one she'd loaned, its initials faint in the lamplight. I pulled out a fresh index card and wrote, Job, check. Library, check. Scholarship proof, check. Registrar call, check. Small wins visible. I composed a draft text to my sister. Every word chosen like stones in a wall. I won't discuss mom via insults. Updates can go through facts. Dates, doctors, costs. I saved it under draft_boundary_1.txt. Some messages are better unsent, but ready. I zipped the keys folder, pressed it flat into my tote with the red-clipped award on top. This was my spine now, paper layered until it could carry me upright. Speak softly and carry a good paper trail, I told myself, bending Roosevelt's old advice into my own. The phrase made me smile, small and steady. As I walked toward the bus stop the next morning, a mail truck rattled past, brakes sighing as it stopped at a familiar box. My chest clenched. The award letter, hard copy, embossed and official, was headed to my parents' address. Their deadbolt could lock more than doors. It could lock futures if I didn't move fast. If that envelope reached their mailbox first, my future would sit behind their deadbolt, again. The grocery store was cold, in the way a place gets when the air conditioning works too hard against what the sky decided to do. I stood in the freezer aisle, comparing prices on mixed vegetables, reading unit costs like scripture. The glass doors fogged at the edges. Somewhere near the bakery, a child laughed, then protested faintly when told no. I slid my finger along the condensation and traced a line down a bag of peas, calculating pennies per ounce and what my paycheck might look like if Marta kept me on the schedule. I reached for a bag, and another hand reached at the same time. I knew that hand before the brain caught up. Fine lines where the rings had sat for years, a small crescent scar from a holiday carving mishap, the quick drawback as if touching me might set off a sensor. I turned. My mother did not step close. She did not say my name. She kept her eyes on the paper towel display stacked neatly across the aisle. "Mom?" I whispered, because even if a word hurts, you know what to call it. Her lips barely moved. "Not here," she said, voice so slight the freezer hum swallowed half of it. "Keep it. Don't call." I felt her palm press against mine for a second, brief and precise, and when she removed it, there was a small key ring sitting in my hand. 2 thin keys, nicked with age. A tiny metal tag, oval, etched with 3 letters that sent a pulse against my skin. The metal was cold enough that I could feel the chill through the heat of my fingers. She didn't hug me. She reached for a sale tag on paper towels and pretended to read it. The angle of her chin the same angle she used in church when she avoided a subject. Her cheeks looked shallow, the way faces sometimes do when sleep has been rationed. The corners of her mouth were tight, not with anger, but with something that held anger back so it wouldn't spill onto the floor. "Why?" I breathed, structure collapsing into one word. She rolled the cart forward. "Keep it," she said again, and then louder, the way shoppers talk when they decide between brands. "I think 2 rolls is enough." She moved away, pushing a cart that had nothing in it yet, the small squeak of its wheel swallowing anything else she might have been tempted to say. I let my hand close around the keys. The chill bit my palm and brought me fully present. It wasn't permission. It was warning and help at once, the kind of help you slip to someone when the room isn't safe. I slid the ring under my cardigan and into the inner pocket, behind the paper sleeve that held the spoon, then picked up the cheapest bag of vegetables so I would have a reason to stand there a second longer. At the end of the aisle, I stepped into an empty cut-through that led to cleaning supplies and knelt as if to compare detergents. I took out my phone, snapped a photo of the keys in my palm. No faces, just metal, the freezer light making a thin flare along the tag. The timestamp printed itself along the top. In the email app, I typed a quick note to myself with a subject line I could search later. S12_mom_keys_supermarket_201000619. In the body, I wrote the shortest story I could. Handed silently by Mom, freezer aisle, no words beyond, "Keep it." I hit send. A small proof moved from my phone to a server somewhere, where stories are safer than in families. Mrs. Y texted. "All good?" I typed. "Got something important. Home in 10. On the walk back, I covered the keys with a napkin in my pocket and let my eyes work. I checked reflections in storefront windows, pretending to study displays while I looked for a tail. No one followed. The bus hissed at the corner and then pulled away. A lawn crew across the street wrestled a mower into a pickup, their gestures big and bored. I didn't let my shoulders drop until I reached the maple at the end of our block. Back at the house, Mrs. Y didn't ask 10 questions in a row. She handed me a dry dish towel for my hands, then leaned against the counter. "Show me," she said. I set the ring on the table. The tiny tag had 3 letters etched into it. a little off-center from a shaky hand with a metal punch. The keys were the kind you get cut at a hardware store, not fancy, nicked at the shoulders where they'd been tried into something many times. "Let's not assume," she said. "Let's verify." We moved to the hall closet. She reached up and pulled down a plastic mail crate I hadn't noticed before. Black marker across the front read, "Hold, gas line repair." "Last year," she said, "they tore up the street. Some of us rerouted mail to neighbors because delivery turned into a treasure hunt. Your folks asked me to hold theirs for a stretch. They never picked up the last batch." She pressed the crate into my hands. "We'll sift." We sat cross-legged on the hallway rug. I sorted by sender first: utility companies, catalogs, a stack of church newsletters, the bank's regional logo winking up at me in 2 places. I sorted by postmark dates next, keeping a little pile of envelopes stamped in the weeks after Grandma Erwin's funeral. The ink on one envelope had bled where rain had kissed it. The thick one in the middle was pristine, sealed, addressed to me, not the household. The sender, our regional bank's trust department. The word beneficiary appeared in the return address line, small and unshowy, as if the envelope didn't want to encourage a scene. "Look at that," Mrs. Y said, voice purely observational. "We'll take a picture before we touch it." I placed the envelope on a clean kitchen towel and took photos. Front, back, close-up of the postmark date, the address line with my name. I opened my keys folder and logged it. S11_bank_POD_unopened. The paper felt strange beneath my fingers. Not heavy, but substantive in the way some papers are. The way you can feel money in tiny fibers even when it's just ink. "Don't rip it," I told myself, and she nodded. "Chain of custody matters." We brought the envelope to the dining table and built a tiny documentary set from ordinary things. I placed a ruler along the bottom edge and today's newspaper in the corner of the frame. I recorded a short voice memo on my phone describing where the envelope had been found and who had been present. I drafted an email to myself, subject line, S11 evidence, unopened bank letter, and CC'd my backup account. I attached the photos. Then I slid the envelope into a clear plastic sleeve and wrote the date, time, and location on a small sticky note I affixed to the outside. Mrs. Y took a pen and, without hesitation, signed a witness note. Found at my house in mail crate during gas line repair hold. Date. Time. Her name in careful letters that matched her posture. I photographed that too. "In God we trust," I said, feeling the calm that follows order. "Everyone else, bring paperwork," she smiled a little. "It's not poetry, but it keeps people from getting hurt." I let my hands shake once. It's important to give fear one tiny window so it doesn't try to break all the glass. We set the mail crate back into the closet and stood looking at the keys on the table. The oval tag's letters nagged at me, not just what they stood for, but how familiar they felt. I pulled Grandma's old address book from my tote, the one with phone numbers written in tidy cursive and small notes like, "Sally, brown hair now," or "Ask Charlene about peaches." Along the back cover, a fading sticker listed a garage locksmith and service code, HLM. The key tag read the same. "You see it?" I asked. Mrs. Y leaned in. "Match," she said. No drama, just confirmation. I ran my thumb along the edge of the tag. "If these fit the mini safe, the envelope explains why they wanted me out," I said, and the sentence wasn't angry, it was architecture. "Then you don't open it alone," she said. "Not for safety, though there's that, but because witnesses matter. If people say you imagined it, you can say, 'We were 3. "Paper," I said. "Then people." "Then people," she agreed. I texted Toriel. "Need a second pair of eyes tomorrow. Garage at noon." She replied with a thumbs up and a lock emoji, which made me laugh because sometimes friends know how to keep a moment from tipping into melodrama. I prepped a small bag the way someone gets ready for a practical errand, not a movie scene. Phone and charger, spare batteries because phones are liars, index cards and a pen, clear sleeves, gloves so the metal smell wouldn't stick to my hands and follow me into sleep. I added a bottle of water and the last granola bar from Mrs. Y's pantry with a note to myself to replace it. As daylight thinned into evening, we walked the 2 blocks to Grandma's old place. The driveway had a hairline crack snaking through it like a map of a river that had changed its course. The garage door sagged just slightly, the way things do when a person stops talking to them. We stood quietly in the drive, not because we were afraid, but because a kind of politeness attaches itself to old houses. You ask them to hold one more story, and you wait to see if they agree. The air smelled like cut grass and motor oil that had been spilled and wiped a decade ago. In the distance, a church bell marked the half hour. That sound always makes towns sound more honest than they are. I held the keys in my palm and let their weight settle. The metal had warmed from the heat of my skin. I slid the smaller one free and looked at the teeth. The notch pattern matched the faint scratches on the old padlock at the side door of the garage. Mrs. Y stood to my left, a little behind me. "Ready?" "Almost," I said. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera, angling it so both the lock and the key were in the frame. I took a photo with the timestamp in the corner and emailed it to myself on reflex. Then I set the phone to record video and propped it on a stack of old bricks where it could see the handle and the padlock in one shot. "Breathe," Mrs. Y said. Not advice, a reminder. I slid the key toward the lock. The metal met metal with that tiny resistance you get when teeth first test an old mouth. The key slid in like it remembered me. I stopped before turning it because the past was about to make a sound. At noon the next day, we met in my grandmother's driveway, the kind of summer noon that presses a hand to the top of your head and reminds you to drink water. Toriel stood near the mouth of the garage with her arms loose, scanning the street like a lifeguard. Mrs. Y held her phone ready, camera open, the timestamp visible at the top. I knelt at the mini safe on the workbench, the same bench where my grandmother used to sand picture frames for church craft sales. The little padlock had the stubborn look of something that had done its job for longer than anyone asked it to. "Recording," Mrs. Y said, steady and calm. I nodded, slid the small key into the lock, and turned. The shackle popped open with a click that sounded sharper than it should have. I set the lock aside, fitting its bite marks into the same circle of dust where it had slept for years. Then I lifted the lid. The hinges made a dry sigh, and a breath of dust and cedar rolled out like a room remembering what was inside it. We stared for a beat, the 3 of us. Inside the safe lay a flat bundle of envelopes tied with twine, a small ledger bound in a faded blue cover with a water ring on the corner, and a zip bag that held 2 folded bank documents the color of good paper. I said what needed saying, because saying it made it orderly. Photo from above, then fronts and backs, today's paper in frame, no tearing, sleeves after. "Copy," Toriel said, already moving to set a clean trash bag on the workbench as our makeshift sterile field. "I'll call out file names as we shoot." Mrs. Y leaned in, but did not touch. I took the first photo from above, the whole interior of the safe in one frame with the local paper's date visible in the corner, then a close-up of the twine, another of the ledger cover. The air smelled like sawdust, oil, and the faint ghost of my grandmother's hand lotion. A swallow chattered in the rafters. Somewhere outside, a mower started and then stalled. I lifted the ledger first, because even in a safe, paper wants air. The cover lifted to a page of neat columns, month after month of deposits, each line ending with a note in my grandmother's handwriting. "For Ella's schooling, no exceptions." The words did something steady to my chest. I didn't cry. I took a photo of the page, then the page after it, then the index card she'd tucked into the pocket with a bank contact written on it in a different pen. I set the ledger on the clean plastic and slid it into a clear sleeve. Under the twine, a note waited in her small slanted letters. If you are reading this, they talked louder than I could. Keep your brush, kiddo. I read it once silently, once out loud. The words were simple and unafraid, the tone of a woman who had known how to bake a cake without a recipe and could still measure justice by eye. The zip bag contained 2 folded bank documents. The first was a generic notice with the bank's trust department letterhead. The second was heavier stock, the kind of paper that asks to be handled with dry hands. Both bore my name. I left them folded, photographed the outside of each, then measured the margins with the ruler for scale, and read off the postmark dates for the recording. One envelope in the bundle was thick, addressed to me, stamped a few weeks after the funeral, still sealed. I slid it into a clear sleeve without opening it. "Witness names," I said. "Soria," Mrs. Y answered, speaking for the camera, then added the date and the time. "Present throughout." "Toriel," said Toriel with the same practiced clarity. "Present throughout." "Ella," I said. "Present throughout." The safe held 2 Polaroids I hadn't seen since I was a kid. One of me holding a brush too big for my hand, my grandmother behind me, grinning. The other of the easel by the kitchen window with a jar of carnations next to it. Proof you could hold in your hand. I photographed those too, then slipped them behind the ledger in their sleeve. Intent, affection, and a bank's bureaucracy. 3 pillars that didn't bow when someone raised their voice. Back at Mrs. Y's table, we built a stack that made sense. Photos first, ledger scans next, then the sealed bank letter, witness note, and a typed transcript of my voice memo from the garage. I emailed everything to 2 addresses with subject lines I would recognize 5 years from now without squinting. S13 _ ledger _ 201000620. S13 _ POD _ envelope _ unopened. We drafted a simple inventory card. Date, time, location, who was present, a list of items removed from the safe, and both witnesses signed it. The plastic sleeves snapped shut with a sound that made my hands stop shaking. "I'm not calling them," I said, meaning my parents. "That's not avoidance," Mrs. Y replied. "That's triage. I'm not posting," I added, glancing at my phone. "Paper before performance," she said, and the corner of her mouth lifted, not in mockery, in recognition. We returned the safe to its spot, closed it, and slid the padlock back through without latching it. The garage door lowered on its track with a tired hum, and our silence on the walk back felt strategic, not tense, the quiet of people who've already said the necessary out loud. Time jump, 3 years and a train ride later. Fall in Chicago. The first student exhibition opened on a Thursday, the kind of night where people wear coats that make noise and hold paper cups of wine like props. The hallway smelled faintly of resin and fresh paint, and voices floated around like cautious balloons. My piece hung at eye level near a soft pool of light, a rain-slicked porch, a suitcase rendered in quiet strokes, a square of lamplight that didn't pretend to save anyone. The wall tag read, "Untitled, Rain and Keys, by Ella, last name." A small red dot appeared next to it an hour into the evening. Someone had reserved it. The dot looked like more than a sticker. It looked like a promise that wasn't asking for a signature in return. The curator stopped beside me, hands clasped, eyes soft. "Your edges are clean," he said. "The story breathes. You didn't shout." "Thank you," I answered, keeping my voice level. "I document before I decorate." He nodded, as if I'd disclosed a secret worth keeping. A couple lingered in front of my piece and said the word restraint 3 different ways. I wrote their phrases in a pocket notebook with a stubby pencil and dated the page. Praise, like everything else, earned a place in keys. I felt it then, not triumph, which is noisy, but stability, which hums. The ledger I had brought with me, tucked in my bag in a fresh sleeve, felt like a spine running up my back. My phone buzzed. The screen showed a social media notification with my sister's name attached. I opened it because not opening it would not make it less public. The photo, my painting. Her smile in the corner turned toward the camera as if she had been the one to bring the piece into the light. The caption, "Family talent runs deep." The comments stacked quickly. Neighbors from Michigan, exclamation points and hearts, and a chorus of pride for our family. Not one mention of my name. I took a slow breath and let the air touch my ribs all the way around before I moved my thumb. Screenshot. Another. I captured the URL, the time, the count of comments, the first 5 names. I emailed the images to Keys, S14__SS_claim_013096_2018.png. The act didn't uncut the cut, but it kept the wound from deciding how to tell the story. "Want me to say something?" Toriel asked at my shoulder, voice low but ready. "Not here," I said. "Document. Don't detonate." The curator passed again, saw my face, and paused. "All good?" "All documented," I said evenly. He nodded once, satisfied, and moved on to introduce a different student to a man in a corduroy blazer. I stepped aside and set my paper cup on a windowsill no one was using. The city's train lines roared at intervals, as if someone were dragging a metal bow across a giant cello. I rehearsed a note I might send later. Dates, gallery name, a photo of my tag, a sentence no longer than it had to be to count. Facts, not flames. I thought of my grandmother's ledger, the line that returned across every page, for Ella's schooling, no exceptions, and felt the thread of that sentence run through the room and tie to the red dot at the corner of my tag. The pride of the dot stayed. The cut of the caption stayed too. Twin truths don't cancel. They coexist until one of them becomes expensive. A quiet baritone at my shoulder said, "Paper before praise," and something in me recognized a language I wanted to keep speaking. I turned toward the voice,